And managing your inner critic, your perfectionist, your people pleaser, all of these archetypes of the inner critic, the imposter, the good girl, the overachiever, these are all
Mhm.
part of the 13 archetypes of the inner critic. When we know how to recognize those stories and what to do with those stories, particularly as creatives with such sensitive soul, then we can manage ourselves through that entire process. But the bottom line, if we let the world in to our writing cave, we're never going to fulfill our highest potential as writers
Yeah.
because there's too many voices in there. The only voice that we need in there is our voice and the muse's voice.
Hello, and welcome to a brand new episode of Rights for Women and a brand new season. It's 2025, and we are kicking off season 6 with a fantastic follow-up interview with Megan Dalla Camina, the author of Women Rising. When I spoke to Megan, we had so much to talk about, and that was one of the very last interviews of 2024. But she talked off air about the possibility of having a second chat about the writer's mind in particular, looking at all those things that affect us as writers: perfectionism, procrastination, fear, all those great things that we writers love so much. Not. And so we scheduled a second interview, which I recorded in December at the end of 2024, and decided it would be a great one to kick off season 6. So that is coming up in just a little minute. A couple of things to tell you about Rights for Women this year and what's happening. First of all, I hope everybody had a great break. I hope that you got lots of downtime, lots of reading time. Hope you got to catch up on the backlist of your very favourite podcasts, including this one. And I hope that you've started 2025 feeling refreshed and ready to just pour out the words and feel inspired. At Rights for Women, we are all about inspiring, motivating, and educating. So that's what we're definitely going to be focusing on this year. A couple of changes. One big change is that we are going to switch to a fortnightly schedule rather than a weekly schedule. A few different reasons for this. One is so that I avoid burnout. I have been doing a weekly podcast now for about 40 plus episodes a year, usually around 43 or 44 a year for the last few years. And while I love it and I can't get enough of talking to writers and authors about their writing, it's very hard to keep up with the reading schedule and to maintain my own writing practice and to get my teaching work done and all the other things that we have to do in life. What actually tipped me over the edge into deciding, though, to go to a fortnightly schedule, just as a trial, we're going to try it out for the first few months of the year, is that in the listener survey at the end of 2024, a lot of people, more than just about half actually, responded that they would like fortnightly episodes. And I think the reason being is that just like it's hard for me to keep up with the reading and the search and preparing and recording for the podcasts, I think it might be a little bit hard for a lot of listeners too to keep up with the weekly schedule of the podcast. We're hoping that the fortnightly schedule works for you, and we'd love your feedback on that. If you'd like to send us any thoughts or comments, just send us an email at w4wpodcast@gmail.com or pop something onto socials in one of our Insta posts or Facebook posts, and we'd love to hear what you think about that, even if you didn't get a chance to respond to the listener survey. Having all of that being said, I'm going to bring the focus for the podcast episodes right back to the writing craft, the writing process, the writing life. Of course, we're going to talk to authors about their books, and I want to promote the books for those authors as much as possible. But I know that all the listeners out there, most of our listenership is writers, and most of you are interested in all of those things I just mentioned, just as I am myself. So to that end, we are going to be focusing on that in the interviews. So I'm going to be very selectively choosing our guests to make sure that you get value in those areas. And the other thing that we're doing as part of our Substack bonus offers is that there will be either a shorter or longer additional podcast, little excerpt from the podcast squirreled away and just sent to Substack subscribers as paid subscribers as a bonus. Everybody who subscribes to Rights for Women on Substack will receive still a weekly newsletter with some writing tips either taken from the episode or from backlist episodes, various posts that we'll be putting up to do with the writing and the writing life. And each fortnight when the main episode comes out, there will be a little bonus selection for paid Substack subscribers. There's quite a few other bonuses going as well, including 4 webinars over the year, which will be purely for paid subscribers. The first one is going to be on backstory, and I'm going to be recording that next month. And there's quite a few other things as well, and things coming up all the time that as we think of them, we're going to add to the bonus list. So whether you're a free Substack subscriber or a paid Substack subscriber, thank you very much for following along. And don't forget, we're very eager to have all of your thoughts and comments and suggestions. So make sure that you keep us informed of what you would like to listen to on Rights for Women and what you would like to receive or be reading on Substack. I won't go into too much detail at the moment about my own writing, only that I am currently writing a novella for the 2025 HQ Christmas anthology. I was in the 2024 anthology, again, A Country Farm Christmas. This year it's going to be A Country Practice Christmas. And I can't tell you too much because we're still very early in that writing process, but only to tell you that my character is a psychologist. She is in the town of Yarrabee, which is where my Blackwattle Lake series is set. And it's going to be a whole new story centered around Hannah Rasmussen, this town psychologist in Yarrabee. So I'm enjoying writing that novella. A little bit behind because I've had some back issues over the course of January, but picking up some pace again to have that ready for the end of February. So I will also be posting, as part of the Substack bonus subscriber bonuses, my diary of a novella. And over February, I'll be doing short video posts a couple of times a week on how that novella is progressing, how the editing is progressing, any thoughts I have on the writing and revision process. So you can find all that on Rights for Women at Substack. And of course, you can follow along on our Instagram and Facebook pages. If you do find that you are loving an episode of the podcast, or if you've enjoyed any of the backlist episodes that you might have gotten to listen to over the holidays, or at any time really, it would be fantastic if you could write a review or give a rating wherever it is you listen, whether it is on Apple, Spotify, whatever your podcast platform is. Don't forget, you can also find the episodes on the Rights for Women website at rightsforwomen.com. And also on the Rights for Women YouTube page, where you'll find the video recordings of each episode. So for anybody who is a Substack bonus subscriber, this week's snippet with this week's additional chat with Megan is only a snippet, I'm afraid, because as of the time that I recorded the interview with Megan, I hadn't decided to go ahead with that additional thing for Substack subscribers. So I've pulled a few little gems out of the interview and squirreled them away for Substack paid subscribers. So it's just a few minutes, but this next fortnight you'll be getting a longer bonus episode with Kel Woods and Joe Riccioni. A few other people coming up on the podcast this season, certainly in the first quarter of the year. Kel Woods, as I just mentioned. I am going to be having a chat with my writing buddy Penelope Janu on the editing process, and we're going to share how we go about our editing and some of the issues that we come up against as we do that. I'm also going to be talking to two authors who have taken the self-publishing route, Sal Gallagher for her fiction book and Kirsten Nixon for her non-fiction book. So that will be a dual guest episode. And I've just recorded an interview with the amazingly resilient and fabulously talented Chrissy Belbray, who will be coming up on the podcast talking about her path to publication and her decision to self-publish her beautiful book, The Florentine Quilt, which I highly recommend you getting out there and grabbing, particularly if you're a fan of historical dual or multiple fiction timelines. It's an absolute cracker of a book. Congrats to Chrissy. I'm going to leave it there and I'm going to throw it over to our interview with Megan. Now, I had actually already started talking to before I started to record the formal interview, so we've already launched in right from the beginning without much of an introduction. But if you didn't get the opportunity to listen to my previous interview with Megan Dalla Camina, highly recommend you do that. You don't have to do them in order. But just a little bit about Megan, if you didn't catch that episode. Megan is a writer and author of 4 books, the founder and CEO of women's leadership and empowerment company Women Rising, a creative, a researcher, and a women's mentor and coach. She left her 18-year corporate career in 2013 to become an entrepreneur and dive deep into her purposeful work helping women step into their power. She is actually completing a PhD in women's spirituality, which sounds absolutely fascinating, but we'll save that for another day. So here is my conversation with Megan Dalla Camina on The Writer's Mind. Thank you for listening to Rights for Women. So good to be back, and I hope you enjoy this chat. Obviously, we covered a lot of stuff from the book last time. And thank you so much for coming back on. I've been really excited to talk to you about this again with that kind of perspective on the writer's mind.
Yes.
So we touched on some of those things, last time. So I've just written like basically a whole lot of bullet points on issues that come up for writers. And I thought I'd
Yes.
just throw them out there and we can chat about them. Does that sound okay?
Oh, it's like one of my favorite things to talk about is writing. So yes, let's go. Anywhere you want to go.
Okay,
I'm so
brilliant. Yeah. Let's start with creative inspiration and living a creative life. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, wow. Just a big topic to start with.
Yeah.
If I reflect on my journey as growing up as an incredibly creative person, like literally the first 20 years of my life, I was a dancer, I was a writer, I was a singer, I was in a band, I was writing lyrics, I was doing all of these things. And then, performing art, college, and then ended up in corporate. And the creativity got squeezed out of me, if that makes sense. Like I
Definitely.
was in that corporate grind for 18 years and I loved a lot of it. It wasn't that I didn't love it, but there was no space for creativity because I didn't create it. I didn't make that space. And what I've witnessed since I wrote my first book, I think our books came out 2012 was my first book as well. I think it was yours. And watching the ebbs and flows over the last 12 years of when I've been creating and when I'm not creating, especially because I create so much in my business, like I'm
Yeah.
constantly creating things. So I think that all of that to say, we have to be, I believe, really intentional and we have to make the space
Mhm.
and the time because otherwise life just sucks it out of us.
Yeah.
And the chaos and the energy and everything that's happening and everything on our to-do list, that if we don't say, okay, number one, I'm going to write a book and this is what it is and this is how I'm going to do it and this is my creative time and my artist dates or whatever that is to get inspired, and then here's why I'm going to get down to writing. I think that's what's required, I would say, most of us to be able to do our best creative work.
I agree 100%. And it's that real balance, isn't it, between nurturing that creative inspiration and letting the muse in and all that sort of stuff, but also that kind of discipline that you need. Like you said, you've got to make the time and you've got to make the plan and all that sort of stuff. So it's really important to get that balance, isn't it? Because there's a certain
Yeah.
amount of discipline with it. You have to actually sit down and have your pen in your hand or have your fingers on the keyboard.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite quotes, and I used to have it on a vision board in front of me, and I will find who the author is because I always like to make sure I know the quotes. And you watch me, I'm going to butcher this so badly. But it's like we have to show up for the work
Yeah.
because we can have talent and we can have inspiration. But if we don't sit our butt in the chair and do the work, what happens? Nothing.
Yeah.
And it is that balance between, okay, yeah, here is the time for my creative inspiration, and here is the time for the nuts and the bolts and the grit. And it's that sort of grit and grace that we need to balance out.
Yeah, yeah. Do you have particular things that you do to nurture your creativity, Megan? Do you do artist dates or what do you find actually helps those creative juices to flow for you?
But where I'm at in my journey now, my biggest source of creative inspiration is meditation and my spiritual practice. And that's the first thing I do every morning. It's non-negotiable. I sit. Sometimes I have longer than other times, but typically, half an hour to 45 minutes. And I have a morning and an evening practice. And in the evening practice now, I'm journaling afterwards. Not because I'm not a journaler as such, but just those creative downloads
Yeah.
of do this, or here's an idea, or here's some words, and go and sit with that. So I'm creating more space than I had before in my evening so that after I have my evening meditation, I just sit. And I've got a beautiful journal that I've just bought in India. And I just could be just a couple of words or it could be half a page. But that for me, and then the other thing for me really is about where is the space in my days because they're pretty packed. I run a big business and I'm doing a PhD, and that's a whole nother thing. So where am I carving out the time to just sit here and stare out the window?
Yeah.
Let the thoughts come and then to actually get them down, because I had, and I'm sure every writer listening to this will understand, I had this brilliant thought last week and I was like, oh, it's so good. Of course I'm going to remember it. Gone. Didn't write it down. So it's making I like the effort and the discipline to, when those thoughts drop in, you have to, all of it, we have to capture them, right? Or it's
Oh,
gone on to the next person.
I've had that so many times. And I was so glad I had an experience. The only time I've had an experience where I wouldn't say it was a full dream, but I was trying to come up with ideas for it was my fourth book, actually. I was under contract. And my publisher had said, oh, maybe something with a pub, because I write rural kind of fiction, and maybe something with a pub at the center, the real heart of the town type thing. So I had that idea. And then it was during the drought. So I'd started researching the drought. Anyway, all these kinds of things just bubbling around in my brain. And I went to bed and I'm sure I'd gone to sleep, but half, you're in that half dream state.
Yeah.
And these three women, that characters came to me, and the connection between them. And basically, it was the spine of the story. And it's the only time it's ever happened, sadly. I wish it would happen more often. But I thought, okay, I lay there and I thought, if I don't write this down, I know it's going to go. So I actually made myself get up and write. I can't remember if I wrote it on my phone or wrote it in a notebook. And when I looked
Yes.
at it in the morning, I went, oh, wow, that actually works. And I sent it to
Yeah.
my publisher and she's like, I love it. So it is so important to grab those things when they come, because so many other times I've had these random thoughts and thought, oh, I really need to do something with that. And then it's just gone.
And it's really honoring the guidance and the inspiration that we get, because it's not random.
Yeah.
None of those thoughts. And it is often in those moments where we're having like a lucid dream, where we're between those two worlds, the
Yeah.
sleeping state, the waking state, or we're in the shower, or we're out for a run or a walk, or we're sitting in meditation, when we can get whatever you call it for you,
Mm.
but we get that inspiration through. And the more we honor it, I believe the more we get of it. It's like if we turn that tap on and we capture that water, that tap's going to keep flowing. But if we don't, and we don't honor that muse, it's
Yeah.
just going to someone else
Yeah,
who's
I agree. I so agree. And what form of meditation do you do, me? I know you've been following that spiritual practice for a long time, and you've spent time in India and all that sort of stuff. Do you have a particular meditation practice that you follow?
look, I have, again, from where I'm at in my practice now, because I'm like 20 years in to, like a proper disciplined meditation practice. I do mantra meditation. I also do breath meditation. I do, different types. But my main form of meditation is a mantra meditation. So it's like a Vedic meditation practice.
Mm.
Yeah. But even just sitting, and it varies with my group and what we're doing. Like this morning, it was mantra meditation, but then just breath.
Yeah.
Just think the breath, just being present, because there's the transcending meditation that you do with a mantra, and then there's being present meditation. Different things call for different types.
Yeah.
But any form of meditation is a good meditation.
Yes, I agree. And it's a great reminder to me. I used to meditate a lot and I have let that go, and I really want to get back into that. So
Yeah.
it's on the list. The other thing that we talked about was this idea of daydreaming and just letting our thoughts roam. And I think that's a really important part of our creativity as well, isn't it? And letting our subconscious do the work rather than always trying to be the logical, rational thinker. And I think that sometimes, like, I'm a bit of a pantser with my story. And sometimes I worry about that. I think, oh, I should be able to plan a book out. But I've really tried. I've tried to plot out a whole novel. But it's not the way my brain works, and I find that it's a little bit stifling because I need to be present with the character as she's going through all the things that are happening to her. And do think that really honoring our subconscious and really letting that kind of take control in a way is important, isn't it?
I completely agree. And it's getting our ego out of the way, thinking that we know what's best for the character or for our own nonfiction, for where the book needs to go. And when we get ourselves out of that way, and that very linear,
Mm.
structured way of thinking, because creativity, of course, is not linear, then we allow ourselves to tap into that flow.
Mm,
And that can be hard if we're very structured as individual, or we have a very predefined way of we think this is what it should look like, or we followed someone and they're like, this is how I write.
yeah.
So then what we try and put on their process. One of the greatest lessons that I've learned as a writer is just trust my own process. And this book, the Women Rising book, it was going to be something completely different. And it was, and Simple, Soulful, Sacred before that was the same. It took me 3 iterations of the book before I just finally just went, okay, just show me what this is meant to
Mm,
be. And then boom, in it comes, rather than this is what it is. It wasn't that at all.
yeah.
Oh, that's my process. Like I now know that that's my process. And like I can trust that. I can sit in that. And for all of us as writers, we will have a version of that, I think.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Because that's true for whether it's fiction or nonfiction. You've been writing nonfiction, and I think a lot of people would probably think, oh, it's just kind of fact, it's planning and all that sort of thing. It's you just lay it all the facts out, but there's so much more to it, isn't it? It's a much more creative process than that.
And it depends on the type of nonfiction that you're
Mm,
writing, right? Simple, Soulful, Sacred is really, it's a spiritual book for women. Women Rising is again, it's a different book. It's a call to arms for
yeah,
women, but it's that they're both deeply creative inspired processes. I think if you were writing, I'm an academic as well. I think if you're writing a textbook, different story,
yeah.
right? That is, yes, that's facts and it's linear and all the rest of it. But if you are writing any form of nonfiction that's not that, yeah, it's definitely a creation
Mm,
experience.
yeah, that's true. We
Yeah.
touched on this whole idea of making time, Megan, and that's the second thing on my list actually is balancing time. And as someone who you live a very full, very busy life with your work and all your commitments and your teaching, how do you go about balancing your time so you do make time for those writing sessions that you need to do?
Yes. Look, let's be real. It's a challenge and it depends on the season that I'm in as well. I was in a season for most of this year writing Women Rising, and then you go into the editing season. And in that period, I'm still writing in my business. I'm still writing my weekly articles and my notes of encouragement and all of these things. And now I'm in a non-book writing season, but I'm in a PhD essay writing season. So what season are you in? I think is important and honoring that. And then where is the space? So I like to batch. So
Right.
write long form articles or thought pieces, or I write opinion pieces for magazine and news outlets. I like to batch. So I'll say, okay, here's 3 hours. Go write all of those things
Yeah.
versus trying to slot it in. Cause then again, I can get into a flow. Or who am I writing for and who's the audience and what does that look like? And when I was writing Women Rising, I would do the same thing and I would batch myself. I find that I'm better in a half a day than I am in a day or 2 days
Yeah.
together until I'm like quite far down the process. If you give me 3 hours, I will get a lot done. Give me 8 hours, I will procrastinate, I'll go and get a chai and I'll fluff around. So my process, shorter windows, yeah, and
Mm,
structured thing. Okay, in this session, you got to write this. Because I also find that to enable that to make the most of the time, sitting down and then when you sit down trying to work out what am I writing in this writing session can be really unproductive because we just ruminate on it. Versus at the end of the last writing session, okay, what am I writing tomorrow? So that by the time you sit to write, you're maximizing the time that you have.
yeah.
Yeah. So
Right.
there's some of my things that work really well.
And do you read through when you sit down for the next session? Are you reading through what you've written the day before, or are you just moving forward from there?
I'm pretty much, unless I'm still in that same section, then I'll do a bit of a read and see where I've left off to get back into the energy of it,
Yeah.
or the thought process, or the research, or whatever it is that I'm writing. But if I'm on a new section, I won't go look at what I did yesterday. I'm just fresh into the
Yeah.
new section.
Yep.
And I don't edit as I write. There's this whole thing in the writers community is you would know,
Yeah.
do I edit? Do I not edit? I'm a bit OCD sometimes. So I have to fix if there's red lines under the thing,
Oh, yeah.
I've got to correct the spelling. But I don't edit.
Mm.
Yeah, I
You
just
get the
write,
whole
and
picture.
then I come
Yeah.
back. Yeah, what do you do? Do you edit as you write?
I used to not. And I think because I spent like about 7 years on my very first book, which was a big, long working through thing that I will probably never publish. But it was a great learning manuscript, good learning book. And then I wrote my first published book as a NaNoWriMo novel. So that was writing 50,000 words in a month.
Ah,
And
yeah,
then I
wow.
added to it. So it was just that I would move forward. And that kind of worked for me for the first couple of books. But then I've actually just done a video for my Substack subscribers on how I've now, after 7 books, discovered my process.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is really to write the first kind of 25 or 30,000 words without too much reading through,
Mm.
and then to stop and look what I've got. So I've got a really solid beginning, and I know I've got all those early elements in the right place.
Yes.
And then that gives me that foundation to then keep going and moving forward pretty much
Oh, I
to the
love
end.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's taken quite a while to work out that's what I have done. Like I've actually done that for the last few books without realizing that I've done that. You know what I mean? And now I've sat down and nutted it out. I've thought, yeah, and that's actually works. And started at one point like beating myself up about it. Why am I doing this? Why am I going back to the beginning? But it's part of my process, and it's just you have to embrace whatever like you mentioned before, it's about everybody finding their own process, and you learn from other people and you can take on board, okay, oh, that's interesting. I might try what Megan does or what Pam does or whatever.
Yeah.
But then if it doesn't work for you, it's like, okay, no, that didn't work, or this part of it worked. I'll
Yes.
keep that in my little bag of tricks. But then
Definitely.
yeah.
Yeah, and honor yourself. I always write the introduction to my books first. And in the 4 books that I've written, the introduction has not changed at
Oh,
all.
really?
Because for me, the introduction is the download
Yeah.
of what the book's about. This is my connection. And it's always very story based. Like, this is my connection to the story that I want to tell and why this matters. And yeah, for all 4 books, it hasn't changed, which I
Yeah.
think is quite remarkable,
Yeah.
really. And then the books unfolded. I've tweaked it, obviously,
Yeah.
but it hasn't really changed. Again, my process, because it
Yeah.
helps me work out why am I here? What is this book?
It's your starting point to then
And that's
keep
my
moving.
starting point. Oh, it's
Right.
I want to go write another book now. You get it?
Excellent. Do it. Do it.
Yeah.
Okay, here's a big one for writers. For me, in particular, procrastination. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I have a really interesting relationship with procrastination. And the first question I always ask, is it actually procrastination? Which I think for writers is a very important question. And to have a little bit of inquiry around that. Is it procrastination, or is it that you're still in the inspiration phase? Is it procrastination, or is it that you are just mulling over and it hasn't settled yet and you're like, you need some more space? Or is it procrastination that, yeah, absolutely, you need to sit your ass down and get to work because you are doing all of the things? So that's always the first question that I ask. It's like when you're trying to make a decision in your personal life and you can't quite get to it. Like, why? Is there more that you need, more information that you need? So yeah, like I would say, don't assume that if you're not working, that it's because you're procrastinating. And then I would also, if you are actually procrastinating, that why is that? And I would go to, what's the story that's playing inside you? Are you a perfectionist and you're too scared to start because you're worried that it's going to be crap? Most of us, most of the time as writers. What are you going to do with that inner critic story? Is it that you're not feeling brave enough to write what you actually really want to write? Is it that you feel like you're an imposter and you're not? Like, why? What are the stories? What are those inner critic narratives that are feeding your procrastination and stopping you from taking the action,
Mm.
which is getting the words down?
Yeah, yeah, I 100% agree. And for me, it's invariably fear, fear of, fear of not knowing what to write. And again, it's taken me a long time to learn. Just sit down and write something. It doesn't matter
Anything.
what it is,
Yeah.
because the writing, the process, the action of actually doing the writing will tap into your subconscious and you'll come up with whatever it is that you need.
Yeah.
So, like I said, it's taken me probably 12 years to really realize I've known that a lot of the time, but
Yeah.
it hasn't really been that clear. And so it's always fear based for me, I think, and fear of, oh, but what if that idea that I do have isn't really good enough? What if the publisher doesn't like it or it doesn't, fulfill the needs of the story? But again, it's just that taking action, doing something, getting my butt in the seat and just writing whatever, because everything
Yes.
can be changed and everything can be deleted, you know?
Yeah, and everything can be edited,
You can
but you
edit it.
can't edit words that haven't been written.
Exactly.
Do you know what I
And
mean? So, yeah.
yeah. And the other thing that you mentioned, two things there that you mentioned, which I also have on my list and are, of course, so connected to this, are perfectionism and imposter syndrome. And you talk about both, particularly the imposter syndrome, a lot in Women Rising. So maybe we can talk a little bit more about that too, me, because I think for writers, there's two phases to the writing process. If you want to be published, writing just for the joy of writing is fantastic, and I fully support and endorse that. But for anybody that wants their work to be published, there's that kind of additional fear of putting the work out there and having other people see it and judge it and perhaps criticize it. So it's really such a complicated thing, isn't it, that we're doing when we're putting ourselves out there on the page or in any form of creative pursuit or public life, that we're putting ourselves out there in front of other people. And that's where I think the imposter syndrome comes in. But can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's really important as creatives, as writers, to separate out those two parts, more than two parts, but the actual writing and like you in your beautiful writer's cocoon in your cave, and to be in there and be true to the art. And if you can do that and separate yourself, put yourself in the writer's cave and separate yourself from that inner critic narrative of what will they think and everyone's done this before and no one's going to listen to me and the publisher's going to hate it. No one's going to buy it. I'm going to be a failure. They're going to renege on my contract. All of that, right? If we can condition ourselves to stay in the process when we're in the process.
Mm.
Because all of that's going to come. All of those things are going to come. Does the editor like it? I went through all of this with my last book because I had a brilliant editor and I was like so intimidated. And it was like, but I was, because I've been doing this work for so long on the inner critic, and I was just stay in the process, be true to the work, whether it's the novel, the story, the characters, the nonfiction. And then when you come into the next arena, which is maybe the editing process or giving the first draft to your publisher, then, okay, now I still need to manage my inner critic stories and my imposter syndrome, but I'm in the process now of getting feedback. How do I manage myself through that process? And then there's that, okay, my work is now public, and the imposter syndrome that we can feel, or really when it's in the public, it's bracing ourselves for the criticism.
Yeah.
So in that scenario, it's setting ourselves up for, like, how am I going to show up in this space? And what do I care about? And whose opinion do I care about? And apart from that, just let it go and have its journey. Like, I believe every book is destined. Every book has its own destiny, and we can do everything that we want in the world to get a bestseller and do all of those things. But the book will decide. It's already predestined, which may sound a bit woo woo for some of the listeners, but that's what I believe. And like Women Rising, we've done everything we could possibly do. My publisher just sent me this really cool mug yesterday, which is my book cover
Oh, I love
with
that.
hashtag all the things,
Oh,
because they're like, Megan leaves no stone unturned. She does all of the things to make sure that this book can support as many women as possible. But once you've done all of this, that cute.
I love it. I really love it.
But once you've done that, then you get to release it, right? And managing your inner critic, your perfectionist, your people pleaser, all of these archetypes of the inner critic, the imposter, the good girl, the overachiever. These are all
Mm.
part of the 13 archetypes of the inner critic. When we know how to recognize those stories and what to do with those stories, particularly as creatives with such sensitive soul, then we can manage ourselves through that entire process. But the bottom line, if we let the world in to our writing cave, we're never going to fulfill our highest potential as writers
Yeah,
because there's too many voices in there. The only voice that we need in there is our voice and the muse's voice.
I love that. I love that. There's so many things in there that you said that I want to pick up on. So first of all, you talk about all of those archetypes in women rising. It's so interesting to actually work through them, and to see which apply to yourself. And I've read the book, but I'm gonna go back over the summer when I've got a break and really sit down and examine it and do some of the journaling work in there. Something that you said then actually really resonated with me. It's something that happened to me recently. So I mentioned at the beginning when we were talking off air about having been at a horse show the last couple of weekends, and the one before this, I put a lot of pressure on myself. It was a state show, but I've kind of been on this learning curve with my horse, and I have to ride one-handed now at the level that I'm riding at, and it's actually really I can do it at home. I can do it when there's no pressure, but I put this pressure on myself. We're out in the arena, the public are there, so it's a bit like putting your book out into the world. And I really I didn't ride well. I didn't treat him well. I have to say, I'm quite, I was a bit ashamed of myself afterwards. I was too hard on him because I was putting all this pressure on both of us. And I came away feeling really dejected, really disappointed with myself, like an absolute failure. And then I had to kind of rally and think, okay, that's fine. That wasn't, but learning from those mistakes meant when I went to the next show this weekend just gone, I took all that pressure off us. I just thought, this is about my relationship with the horse and our long term kind of partnership and all that sort of thing. And I didn't go there to win. I didn't even go there to get a ribbon or whatever. I just went there to be calm and relaxed. And we did that. And I came away feeling so much better and so much happier. And it's time and time again, I've talked about this on the podcast. The That kind of relationship with my horse and my riding parallels all the time my relationship with my writing, because even though it's a physical thing that you're doing with the horse, there's also all this mental and emotional energy that goes into it, just like there is
Yes.
with writing.
And
And
energy.
the
The horse
energy,
feels all
that's
that
right.
energy. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think in terms of writing, we're also afraid of rejection and criticism and that negative feedback that we think is, oh God, or a bad review or a 1-star rating or something like that. But there's so much we can learn from those things. And some of it you take on board. You have to sift through it, don't you? And you take it on board, and the things that really resonate with you and you think, yeah, that could be true. But that's okay because I can fix that the next time I write a book or the next time I write something. So there's a lot to learn, I think, from failure and from rejection, isn't there?
Yeah, oh God, there's so much in what you just said. Absolutely. Because the thing I was thinking about when you were talking about your horse and that experience and that parallel to writing, what do you want the experience to feel like? What is your intention for the experience? What is the intention for the book that you're writing? And the process is the way. It's writing both of my books. These last two, I've got four, but these last two, I would play mantra in every writing session. And that energy, I believe, completely infused into the book. Just like the horse, you sit on the horse. Well, before you even get to this, the horse knows everything that's going on
Yeah.
with your energy. And when we change the energy going into the process, we change the process and we change what happens after the process. Like
Exactly.
so beautifully articulated. And now I can't remember what your question was, but that just came.
It was just about, yeah, I totally agree with everything. And that whole thing of the energy is so
Yes,
important, and your intention
your
and
intention.
learning from that process, but also learning when we do get the criticism or the feedback. Because this is such a huge thing for writers is,
Oh,
you
yes,
know,
that's
I
right.
guess at that first level, we're going to get feedback from our editors and
Yes,
publishers and agents or whatever. And that can be minimal, can be kind of line editing stuff, or it can be
yeah.
like, no, this
Could be
actually isn't working. We don't
everything.
want this book.
Yes, yes,
And then you've got the next level, which is putting it out there to the readers into the bigger,
yeah.
wider world.
So in the editing process, and again, I just went through this, so it's very current for me. Number one, always have a growth mindset. So Professor Carol Dweck's work around the growth mindset. And my favorite growth mindset question is, what can I learn here? And if you go into an editing process, number one, hopefully you're working with an editor that you respect. And if you're not, that you've got a problem right off the bat, right? But hopefully all things going to plan. You're working with an editor who you think's great, who's going to add value to your book. What can I learn here? And that, because I felt myself in my editing process with this book, which is so close to my heart, of the first sort of critique, and you can you can just feel your back going. And you can feel like, oh, she doesn't know anything about this, and this is my space, and the ego comes in. And if you can soften down all of that and go, what can I learn here? Then you open yourself up to, okay, there's going to be suddenly something in here that's going to be great. And that process also changes the relationship dynamic so that you can then go through it. And part of that as well is staying in your power in the editing process. Because some edits will come back and you'll go, no, don't agree with that. And here's why I don't agree with that. And having that respectful conversation to say, this is why I've done it like that, and then get to some agreement. Versus what we can often do as writers is we just go into sort of shame and, oh, my writing's terrible. A critic comes up and we're done for. So I think that's very helpful in the writing and editing process. And then when we put our books out, I love Seth Godin. Like one of my favorite, he's like my ultimate brain crush. And he says he never reads his reviews, never, ever. But so many authors will just scan, and then they'll find the one-star review and they will agonize over it. And it becomes the narrative that runs in their heads. And we have to realize how harmful and damaging it is to take on feedback from other people. We don't know them. We don't know their circumstances. Nothing. Even if it's a critic, same thing, it's still completely subjective. So also being intentional about who do we listen to and who do we not? Who do we care about and who do we not? Brene Brown talks about the 6 people that she has on a square of paper. And if you're not on that square, thank you, but I really don't care what you think about me, my work, my life, my family. You know what I mean? Because you're not in the arena with me. You don't know me. So having our own frameworks for how seriously do I take on feedback from strangers on the internet, particularly, is a serious question we have to ask ourselves, and then put some boundaries around that.
Yeah. I occasionally look at reviews. It's usually only if I have to go on to Goodreads to upload a book or something.
Yeah.
And then there might be, I might catch the latest review. But I do have author friends who go on there religiously and are checking reviews.
Yeah.
And then are like, oh my God, I've got a 1-star review or a 1-star rating. And it's the old thing too, that Goodreads is for readers. And it's a space where they can express what they felt about a book.
Yeah, and they're entitled to their feeling and their experience. And maybe you triggered something for them and they've gone into this place and it's opened up a whole thing. Maybe they're just having a really bad day. Maybe they're just an awful person. Who knows why someone would believe a 1-star review? How awful. I would never, ever do that to somebody else. But that's their prerogative.
Yeah.
The question that we have to ask ourselves is not that happened. What meaning are we making from that thing that happened? And we get to choose that. We're completely in our power around that. And we need to choose wisely, because otherwise, especially as artists, are like gentle souls. On the inside, we have to really just keep ourselves safe.
Yeah. And it can trigger a whole lot. Like I know I've had many rejections over the course of my publishing career, but there was one particularly harsh criticism from a publisher who I'd submitted to. And I really let that get to me. It completely crushed me. And all the other good things that have been said about my books and the nice reviews and the nice comments from readers and all those great feelings completely went out the window. And I just really honed in on that one comment. And I've learned over the years, like you say, it is such a subjective thing. Even you can give your book to 10 publishers and you'll get completely different responses from them.
Yes. And look at all of the writers who are the most famous best-selling authors in the world. Stephen King, Carrie got rejected by 30 publishers. You're in the trash. His wife picked it out and gave it to one more. Boom, there's Stephen King. J.K. Rowling, like anybody.
Yeah.
we just need to think about, what is my intention? What is my purpose for doing this? Why am I doing this work? Who am I serving through this work? And then we stay the course.
Yeah.
And these days, oh my goodness, there's so many options for how we get our work out into the world. You actually don't need anybody. You got an internet connection, go. Do you know what I mean? So stay in your power,
Yeah.
make your own choices and manage your mind.
Yeah.
It's the
So
most important
important.
thing.
Something you said earlier, Megan, that I just wanted to come back to quickly was this thing about you said that kind of idea of stories destined to come out at a particular time. And I really believe that as writers, obviously we evolve, we learn just as we do as people, our skills improve. And I think sometimes, and I finished this one particular story that I wrote a few years ago now, and I really labored over it and I spent a long time on it. It's very close to my heart because it's based on a friend's pretty traumatic experience. So there was layers in terms of how I wanted the story to be perceived and worrying about whether it would be connected with her or whatever, because it is fiction. And I wrote it and I submitted it to a lot of publishers and I got great feedback on it, but it kind of wasn't for them. It's written in, interestingly, I've always written in third person and I
Mm,
try and write in very close third person. So it's quite deep point of view. And for some reason, I've always really shied away from first person. I haven't really enjoyed in the past reading first person books and I've kind of shied away from that as a writer. But then this year, at the beginning of this year, I wrote a novella in first. I thought, oh, it's small. It's just something I just wanted. I always try and do something new with each book for me. So I'm learning something new, a new skill, whatever. So I thought, I'm just going to have a crack. And it's only 33,000 words. If it doesn't work, I'll change it back to third, whatever. So I read this first person book and I had been reading a lot more in first person as well for some reason. And I actually really enjoyed it. And then I thought, I wonder if that would work for this story that I really love and I want to get out there, but it's currently just sitting there. And I went back and this is going to be next year's project, but I went back and I just rewrote the opening in first person and it was so much better. Like it just allowed me to get closer to that character. And for that story, I feel like I really need to embody that character and really be. And I thought,
mm,
oh my God, wow, like I can actually do this. And I think this will make a huge difference to the overall voice of the story.
uh,
But I wasn't ready for, 3 or 5 or 10 years
yes.
ago. It wasn't where I was in my writing journey. So I love that what you said about sometimes the stories have to wait until we're ready to get to them.
Yes. I love that you've said that. And it's so interesting because I get asked whether I would ever write a novel. And I've always been like, no way, I couldn't. I'm not skilled enough. I don't have, I'm a nonfiction writer and a teacher and blah, blah, blah. And it's so funny, like listening to you. And I've been getting this inkling lately. And it would need to be around my work and my teachings,
Mm.
and everything, but a novel. And lately I've been thinking, oh, interesting. That's so like where I'm at now on my journey. So it's like, sometimes we have to let it unfold, just
Yeah.
like you weren't ready to, for whatever reason, to write in that first person. And then you can start small. Like maybe I'll write a short story. Like
Yeah.
you can start small and then like just get your legs
Yeah.
about it and build that courage as well that I think it
Yeah.
takes. And then see that magic of, okay, I'm just going to change the first part and wow,
Mm.
like it's taken on a whole new life. I
Yeah.
think it takes a lot of courage to be a writer
Oh, 100%.
and then to go and experiment with new things. Like for me to go write my nonfiction book, which I will,
Mm.
like I know how to do it now. It's still challenging, but yeah, I've got that philosophy. If I say I'm going to go write a novel, yeah, I think I might take 5 years to get myself ready for that. But
Yeah.
yeah,
And like you were saying before about the energy, like I feel very energized now to go back to that project that's been sitting there. And of course, I was disappointed when that first few rounds of submissions, people know, no, it's not for
yes,
us, whatever. But just letting it sit there, and I'm not going to go into it with too many expectations, but I don't feel like the story itself needs to change, but it's that voice. And I'm actually really excited to go
yeah,
back to it now. So it's given me that new
yes.
energy for it, which
Yeah, I
will be
love that for you.
great.
And sometimes it is a timing thing. Simple Soulful Sacred came out in 2019. This is 4 years before books,
Mm,
right? But I knew that I didn't know that this was the book, but I knew that this was the realm of the book for women rising. But I also knew it had to be the right time
yeah.
for it to come. And when we pitched it to publishers, and I ended up with Wiley because they just got it they just got it. And then I said, we had a 6-month process from pitch to publish. Which never happened. I said, I think it needs to be out in September this year. I was still writing.
Yeah.
And they were like, we agree. Like, we're in the zeitgeist. Let's go.
Yep.
And that's what happened. But it took me 3 years to get ready to write that book. So it's that, again, trust, right? Trust the
Yeah.
process, trust the time. Know when it's procrastination versus you're in your process. And then when it is time, go, get to work.
And also for me, it's been really realizing, a bit like the horse riding, I'm in it for the long haul, right? I'm here. Writing is
Right.
a big part of my life, and it's always going to be.
No rush.
So there's no actual rush to have to get it out now. Let
Yeah.
it brew, let it have that time to marinate and all those sorts of things that a creative project needs.
Yeah.
And then when the time's
Yeah.
right, it will happen.
But that's so important as well. I feel like that with my PhD dissertation process at the moment,
Mm.
which I'm 2 years away from writing because my first 2 years is coursework, which will then inform the dissertation. And the dissertation, I know it's a book and I want to write it now, but I'm like, no, you're just going to sit. You're going to sit for 2 years and do your coursework. Then you're going to do your dissertation and then you're going to turn that into a book.
Yeah.
And that's what this needs. So I'll write something else in between, but it's this time.
Mm. It takes the
Let's
time
not,
it takes.
not rush.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your PhD on again, Megan?
It is a Doctor of Philosophy in Women's Spirituality and Leadership.
Brilliant. Oh,
So good.
so good.
I'm in final week of first semester, which is it's the week where you just, what have I done to myself? But I love it. I just love it. And if you love it, and if you have that feeling, it's like when you're writing a book.
Yeah.
It's like, do I want to do a presentation at 4 a.m. tomorrow morning because I'm doing it in the US? No, but I'm here for the work. I love it. So that's how we write.
That's right. And keeping that focus on that
Yeah.
love and the energy and the joy that we get from it is just so
Yeah.
important, isn't it? Because there is all the drudgery and there's the 4 a.m. mornings and there's the re-edits and all that
Yeah.
stuff. But at the core, we've got to have that love for what we're doing.
We have to. And I think there's an article on my website, certainly in my book, but there's probably free stuff on my website as well. I would encourage all the writers listening to go and understand the science of grit. Like, really understand it. And that grit is about the passion and perseverance to achieve your long-term hard goal. And there's things in the model of grit that we have to cultivate. We have to cultivate the passion. We have to cultivate the deliberate practice. I'm going to write tomorrow at 9 a.m. for 2 hours. That's deliberate practice. We have to cultivate the purpose, which I like to call for the sake of what am I doing this? And we're fueled by hope. And that hope fuels us that we can actually go and achieve this long-term hard goal. And I always talk about and teach grit with grace. So we need to build that grit because that's how we keep getting reignited with that passion and do the work and that grace to go gently in the process. So that model I find is, as a writer, is incredibly helpful for all aspects of that journey.
Yeah, that's great. So the science of grit, you're calling.
Yeah.
Checking that out, and I'll find that article and I'll put the link in the show notes. It's really interesting because the next thing I was going to ask you about, Megan, resilience and determination.
Yeah.
It's that kind of is that whole idea of grit, isn't it?
Resilience, the science of resilience is a little bit different. The science of resilience tells us that resilience is not about endurance. Resilience is about renewal. So they sit together. And when I teach about this in the Women Rising program, and in the Grit and Grace module, I teach about resilience because it's part of it. So the point here for writers is, how are you continually renewing yourself, renewing your energy, renewing your spirit, renewing everything that gives you the fuel so that you can have the grit, keep going. That renewal piece is you do yoga, 5 minutes meditation, go for a walk, have a drink with your girlfriends, watch funny videos on YouTube, go on an artist date, like Julia Cameron would tell us once a week, which I'm going to start next year. And what is it that renews you? That's what fuels your grit. Yeah. So that linkage again is really fundamental. Nice.
It has been so good talking to you. I could chat to you for so long. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I've loved. I feel so honored that we've had two conversations. I've loved talking to you. And yeah, I can't wait to read the new novel.
Oh, thank you. And don't forget, everybody who's listening, you can check out Megan's website. So there's a womenrising.com website, isn't there, Megan? And then you've got your Megan Dalla Camina website as well.
Yeah, so there's womenrisingco.com, but the main ones, megandellacamina.com and womenrisingbook.com.
And if you haven't read Women Rising, I just urge everybody to grab a copy and just to have it there, because I know it's going to be one of those books that I just keep going back to, like these other ones we've been talking about, and it's so important. And I can't wait to read your next missive.
It'll be a minute. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Megan. Enjoy your break. And